Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to episode 2 of the Jettison with your host, Joey Rudikowski. Today, we're going over the top 5 reasons why you are not losing fat. So let's dive right into it. My number one reason is that you are not actually in a calorie deficit. A lot of people will think they're tracking their calories accurately, but they're missing the mark on some stuff. For instance, they may not be tracking oils in their food, like cooking with olive oil or cooking with butter. They're not tracking liquid calories, for instance, the coffee that they're drinking in the morning. But in general, just not accurately tracking your calories and being in a true deficit, meaning your maintenance calories, you are not actually underneath that maintenance calorie on, a consistent basis. This also can come with, people will actually track pretty accurately during the week, and then the weekend comes and their calories get up to maintenance, maybe even beyond that, just from like binging on the weekends or just not tracking accurately on the weekends. And what ends up happening is somebody's like, oh, I've been tracking like super accurate all week. Why am I not losing weight? Why am I not losing fat? And what they don't realize is the weekend binges brought their calories back up here. So what they did during the week, it's kind of more even keeled like that, where, even just like a couple days of getting up to that, getting up to their maintenance or beyond that is kind of making the entire week a little more even keeled to where they're not truly in a deficit from a week to week basis. A good way to think about this is not just tracking calories on a day to day basis of like that calorie goal, which is important, but also take a look at your weekly calories and how much you need to get on a weekly basis. Because you can also use that as a tool of where if you know you're going to have a Saturday or a Friday where your calories are going to be up, you can kind of adjust that throughout the week. Maybe you lower it really a lot on like a non-training day, and that way you can make sure your entire weekly total of calories is where it needs to be in terms of your deficit. Um, and for a deficit, I usually don't recommend going beyond 2 pounds per week or really 1% of your body weight. And that's really at the beginning of a diet. 1 pound per week is ideal. That's usually where most people feel comfortable if they're tracking accurately, where you're still seeing that steady progress, but you're not so low on calories that it's starting to affect training, and you're really starting to get hungry. Somebody more advanced can usually get down to that 2 pound per week, 1% body weight rate. It also depends on how much fat you have to lose. If you're a really overweight, obese person, you can drop a significant amount of weight because you have way more to lose at the beginning of a diet. But that's my top reason is you're not actually in a calorie deficit by definition even if you think you are. Um, just inaccurate tracking. So make sure you really try and stick to foods just to kind of gauge your calorie, amount of foods with like the least amount of ingredients. Sticking to really simple things at least for a couple days so you know how your body is reacting to as accurately as you can track your calories. Whereas some people are like, oh, I've been eating Chipotle's healthy, but it's like, just because your diet app says, it's 4 ounces of chicken or whatever from Chipotle, that could vary from who's scooping the chicken out, and what the actual amount of ingredients is. You really don't know, so that makes it inaccurate to track, even though you think you're tracking. Is it really as accurate as possible? And that's not to say you can't eat out and stuff like that on a diet. You definitely can. It's just the more you can control of those variables, the more accurate you're going to be to those calories. Um, and, it's just going to make your life a lot easier knowing exactly the amounts. That's why people weigh their food. Or you just know, a prepackaged like food service, the exact calories and the macro amounts that are in that. So that's the first reason you're not losing fat is you're not actually in a calorie deficit, even though you think you are. My number two is you've been yo-yo dieting for so long that you might actually be tracking your calories accurately, But from what you used to lose weight on and fat before, because you've yo-yo dieted so much, your metabolism has adjusted as you've gotten down and down and down to now your metabolism knows to keep homeostasis. All right, this person's going to live on this amount of calories. I'm going to try and retain as much as I can because your body is always at all times trying to keep homeostasis. Your body does not want to lose fat and does not want to lose weight because it knows it needs to keep that for energy stores. And the more you quote unquote starve yourself, meaning you're underneath that maintenance to keep your homeostasis, your body is going to fight back and adjust. So if you're constantly like crash dieting, for 12 weeks and then you binge back and then crash diet, your body does not have a chance to really like have a nice reverse back up to where you're increasing your metabolism again. That's why if you're just chronically losing weight at like an extreme case like 800 calories or something like that, you're eventually going to plateau out to where your body's going to adjust to that and it's not going to lose at that rate that you wanted to. That's why having a diet phase and then a maintenance phase and a diet phase are so important, is because it gives your body that time to have its metabolism adjust. So a lot of times these days you'll hear like, oh, you actually lost weight and you were eating more. That's because you're not quote unquote going to that starvation mode, which I hate that word in the fitness industry, but your metabolism is coming back up. If you give it a little more food, it's ramping back up versus just crash dieting and, chronically slamming your metabolism. So that's the second reason, is you've been yo-yo dieting for so long that, say you lost weight on 1,700 calories for like 2 pounds per week, and you've been doing that for so long without any adjustments that now you're like barely losing half a pound because that's like what you did before. Your body has adapted to that, and you haven't, it's not just like you're going to have that set amount of calories and your metabolism is just going to lose fat on that forever. So be mindful of that. If you're like really, really low on calories and you're still not losing weight, it's probably time for a maintenance phase or a reverse diet to ramp your metabolism back up, feel good again, feel what it's like to actually like eat a good amount for your body again, and get to that place where you're feeling good. And then you might find like you might not only need like a 500 calorie deficit to then start to bring that back down. So that's my second reason you're not losing fat, is you've been yo-yo dieting for so long that your metabolism is basically just so well adapted to being in a low calorie amount, you have nowhere else to go with your calories. Number 3, you're not eating enough protein. So real quick rule of thumb, everybody should be getting at least 0.5 grams to 1 gram per pound of body weight. So if you take a 200-pound individual, that would be from 100 grams of protein per day to 200 grams of protein per day. 200 is the higher end, and the more higher on that end you're going to be, the more satiated you're going to be, because protein is the most satiating macronutrient. So that's where, me personally, in a diet, I like to be on that higher end of protein, not only because it's going to help you preserve muscle mass, more importantly than that, it's going to help you really stay fuller for longer and feel like you're still eating a good volume of food, even though you're technically in a calorie deficit. It's really just a tool. I like eating that high, but some people, a gram per pound of body weight is a lot, especially if you haven't been doing that before. So at least aim for 0.5 grams per pound. That's a big spectrum. So as long as you're within that threshold, you're good. A lot of people, what happens is they're not eating enough protein. They start dieting and then they're starving because they're not feeling satiated, and then they end up binging back and forth. So that's a big reason. My number 3, why you're not losing fat, is you're not eating enough protein. So when you are in a calorie deficit, you're not getting as hungry as fast. All right. Number 4, this is actually kind of a funny one. Number 4 is you actually might be losing fat, but the scale isn't moving. In society, we put so much emphasis on that number on the scale. And sometimes the scale can be deceiving, especially if you're like recomping, as in you're losing fat, but also like you're building muscle sort of at the same time, especially if you're like kind of new to lifting and can do that. You might find the scale is like not really moving as fast or maybe even at all as you expected it to. But there's other markers that change is happening. One, clothes are starting to fit better. Maybe your pants aren't as tight like around your waist. Maybe your belt is fitting better. Um, you just have those visual cues like, oh, I'm like actually starting to look better, because your body is looking better and recomping itself maybe at that same body weight. So you might actually be losing fat. It's just the scale itself may not be moving at all or as fast as you want it to. So do be like wary of that. That's why I recommend like any of my clients and people I give advice to is you want like especially at the beginning of your diet and a check at least on a monthly basis. I always recommend doing a circumference around your belly button just to see where you started with that measurement there and then where you like ended up a month later, a month after that, and so on and so forth, because it is a good tool. Like, you know maybe the scale, maybe you're bloated from you had like a salty meal or you've been drinking a lot of water, and the scale can be deceiving and discouraging for a lot of people, especially if you have a history of like putting way too much emphasis on that number. It may be a good idea to not even like track it sometimes at all for some clients. um, Another really good tool is progress picks. Take a pick one week, next week, and then compare like on a month to month basis, like how different are you looking. Another good thing is like, how is your training going? Like, are you feeling good from your workouts? There's many variables to that. So be very wary of that. Like, you may be losing fat, but the scale may not be moving for you. So my number four is just be wary of the scale sometimes lies and it doesn't tell the whole story. All right, my number five of the reasons you are not losing fat is your NEAT has decreased as you've gotten deeper into a diet. NEAT, for those of you who did not know, is your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. A lot of big words, but really just the way to think about it is the amount of movement you do during your day that is not like specific when you're in the gym. So this is just your daily, like, chores around your house, walking into the office at work, you're fidgeting at your desk, tapping your foot on the ground, kind of these jerk movements your body does just throughout the day, all added up, is called your NEAT. But really, the way to think about it from a diet perspective and a fitness perspective is as you get deeper into a diet, like we talked about earlier in this podcast, is that your body wants to try and keep that homeostasis at all times. So as you are not having as much energy available to you in a deficit, and as you're, getting deeper into a diet and you're lowering calories, your body is going to try and just subconsciously have you not move as much because it wants you to conserve energy. So a lot of times what happens is people don't realize is like you might have moved just subconsciously throughout your day a lot more when you were more well fed, and as you've gotten deeper into the diet, you don't even realize it, but you're just not moving as much. So that's also helps, your body keep that homeostasis. So you're like, well, I'm not losing as much fat, or I'm not losing fat at all now. I'm 6 weeks into a diet. Like, what happened? And that can be a culprit, is like you're just naturally like not moving as much, you're not walking outside as much, all these things. A good way to counteract that is to count your steps. Really, in 2025, that's the best marker you can do, is because if you set, all right, I know I need to get 7,000 to 10,000 steps per day. If you're tracking that, there is no, you know what kind of activity outside of the gym you're really getting to try and counteract that need. It's not a perfect science because there is, some other areas in your life that your NEAT may decrease even with tracking your steps. But at least if you're tracking your steps, all right, I know like I'm getting this amount per day and this variable does not move at all, along with the gym. So that's my top 5 reason is you're not moving as much as you used to and you think you are, as you getting deeper into a diet. So be wary of that. It's not a huge difference, but it does make a difference over time, especially, the harder you are going into a diet, the further you are into a diet, the more that NEAT is going to decrease. So be a quick podcast, quick video, but those are my top 5 reasons why you are not losing fat. Just to recap, first one was you're not actually in a calorie deficit, even though you think you are. By definition, if you're in a calorie deficit, your body does not have enough calories. It will lose weight/fat. If you are truly in a calorie deficit, people will argue I am in a calorie deficit, but if you are not losing consistently over a week, you are by definition not in a calorie deficit, and your metabolism may be slower or you're not tracking as accurately as you think you are. My number 2, similar, is you've been yo-yo dieting so much that your metabolism has adapted and slowed down so much that your calorie deficit of what your body needs is almost impossibly low, that you're just not going to be able to sustain that. That's when a good thing like a reverse diet comes into play, where we can boost that metabolism back up and get you back to a much more sustainable calorie deficit amount into a diet. Number 3 is not enough protein. So you're not getting between that 0.5 grams to 1 gram per pound of body weight. So make sure you're getting enough protein. You'll feel a lot more satiated, and it'll help preserve muscle, and just be a lot better for you, especially in a diet and just in regular life. Number 4, you are technically losing fat, but you are not seeing the scale move. Number 5, your NEAT has decreased. As you've gotten deeper into diet, you're just not moving as much. So hope this video and this podcast helped you guys out. It's way quicker of a podcast, but hope these help you out. And if you need any help at all, or any help with your fitness, or just want to get any advice on anything, follow me at Jettison ATS on Instagram, Twitter, and I'll be more than happy to help you guys out. So thank you guys for listening to this shorter podcast, but thank you and peace.